this order of the Virginia Commission to End Hunger. And I will ask if Ms. Harris Green can please take roll by voice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Price?
Here.
Delegate Anthony?
Here.
Delegate Cousins? Delegate Owen?
Here.
Delegate Taylor? Senator Roan?
Here.
I hear you. Senator Pekarsky? Senator Craig? Joynita Nicholson? Pamela Irvine?
Here.
Vivica Craik? Abiana Spencer? Terriel Williams Ford?
Ibiana's here. Sorry about that. I couldn't get off mute.
My apologies. I mispronounced your name. I got you. Eddie Oliver?
Here.
Jennifer Montgomery? Rakia Fagans? Soel Ahmed? Robin Robbins? Madam Chair, there were some that are in the waiting room.
Okay, I see that Ms. Vivica, Ms. Jennifer, Senator Craig, and Delegate Taylor have joined us. Thank you, Ms. Harris Green, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking time today, excuse me, in order to be here for today. And so I just want to remind those that are watching from home and all of us here today that with our virtual meetings, we will not be taking any votes today, but we are going to continue our conversation as we're investigating hunger and what it looks like across the Commonwealth, and as the commission itself is moving toward legislative proposals that we will recommend to the General Assembly for this upcoming legislative session in 2025 and beyond. So we are, and let me ask if Hannah and Julia, if I missed anything or if there's anything that you want to reiterate for our virtual meeting policy.
Madam Chair, there is just one thing. It's not related to the virtual meeting policy, but I just want all of the members to know that the meeting materials for today's meeting, it appears, were all inadvertently uploaded to the September 18th meeting page. So until that's resolved, that's the link that they can all be accessed at. I'll send that link in the group chat so that everyone has access to it.
Yep, and for the public, we'll work to get that fixed, but all of the information is online. But just look in the September one for the 18th for this. So thank you for that. I am excited about our agenda. We're going to hear from Julia and Hannah on some information from what's happening across the states as it pertains to legislation and addressing food insecurity. And we also have some guest presenters. So thank you again for joining, and I'll turn it over to Julia and Hannah.
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chair. This is agenda item 2, by the way. It's a presentation on legislative trends in addressing food insecurity across the states. Hannah will screen share the presentation before we begin. And just a brief overview, these are all, oh, here we go. Okay. So this is a very brief high-level overview of general categories of legislation relating to addressing food insecurity that have been either proposed, introduced, or fully passed within recent years in states across the nation. And you can go to the next slide. This is just a brief overview of the roadmap, if you will, of the presentation. So we have these general categories: legislation relating to SNAP, legislation relating to K through 12 education, higher education, and then another category for a few types of legislation that don't fall into any category. Next slide. Okay, so to begin, we have supplemental nutrition assistance program legislation. There's a few categories of this. First, there's legislation relating to simplifying the SNAP registration process. So 2 examples, which is more like 4 examples because we have 3 from New Jersey. We can begin with Texas. This became effective in 2021. It aimed to simplify the SNAP registration process specifically for seniors and people with disabilities by extending the recertification deadline, creating a shortened or streamlined application form, and allowing registration by phone. New Jersey passed all of these 3 bills during their 2020-2021 legislative session, the first of which allowed registration by phone. The second provided for seniors a shorter registration form and allowed for cross-enrollment, between Medicaid and SNAP. So that was essentially included with a directive to provide for increased data sharing between the state's various social services programs and platforms to allow the appropriate agencies to create the procedures necessary to facilitate simultaneous or cross-enrollment in Medicaid and SNAP for seniors. And it also required the Department of Human Services, in consultation and cooperation with senior citizen advocacy organizations, to engage in comprehensive outreach efforts to ensure all eligible seniors are aware of their eligibility, as well as these streamlined processes. And finally, New Jersey's 3rd bill authorized the creation of a mobile app that enables state residents to register for SNAP and track their benefits from their cell phones. Next, this is legislation relating to expanding eligibility for SNAP, namely eliminating barriers to establishing eligibility and reducing benefit cliffs by ensuring that an individual's increase in income does not result in an automatic loss of benefits. One example is Maine. This was passed in 2021. It eliminated the asset test and permits individuals to participate regardless of value of countable resources. Nebraska, also 2021, similarly eliminated the asset test, as well as adjusting gross income eligibility and reducing the benefits cliff, as previously mentioned. And finally, Missouri passed more recently in 2023. This legislation established a transitional assistance program specifically aimed at reducing benefits cliffs by establishing a gradual decrease in monthly benefits that's proportional to an individual's increase in income. And finally, this is the other or miscellaneous category. Arizona in 2021 passed legislation which established a plan to price match SNAP purchases of eligible Arizona-grown produce for the purpose of incentivizing the use of SNAP benefits to purchase locally grown produce, including from farmers markets, farm stands, community-supported agriculture sites, grocery stores, and corner stores by providing matching funds per transaction. All right. In our second category of legislation, it's K through 12 education. The very significant one is free school meals. As of April 2024, 8 states have passed legislation to provide universal free school meals to all students regardless of income. This is just a small sampling of 3 of those. First, there's California. This, I believe, is the oldest program. It was the first passed. And so all 3 of these, to save time, California, Massachusetts, and New Mexico's universal free school meal programs essentially do the same thing. They require each public school or charter school operating or participating in one of the national school meal programs, so National School Lunch or National School Breakfast, administered by the United States Department of Agriculture, to provide 2 meals, breakfast and lunch, to all students at no charge each school day, regardless of household income or eligibility for free or reduced price school lunch, and to require each school board to maximize federal reimbursement or access to available funds including by requiring school boards that govern school districts with schools that have an identified student percentage above 40% or above the minimum ISP for community eligibility provision eligibility, or CEP, to participate in CEP. And as I said, these are just 3 of the 8. And of the 8, there is an outlier. Colorado's program is optional for school boards to adopt for their entire school division. But for those school divisions that do adopt it, it would provide universal free school meals, lunch, and breakfast to all students, regardless of income. All right, this is the second category in K-12 education. It's relating to legislation aimed at expanding farm-to-school programs or incentivizing school divisions or school food authority agencies to purchase locally grown produce. One example is New Mexico. This was a provision within the legislation establishing universal free school meals, and it creates an incentive for school food authorities to purchase locally produced and unprocessed or minimally processed products. And as you see, it's the incentive at the time was the greater of $1,000 or 10 cents times the number of qualifying lunches. Maine has established what they call the Local Foods Fund, which incentivizes the use of locally produced foods in Maine schools through matching $1 for every $3 that a school administrative unit pays for food grown or produced in Maine. And Colorado's Healthy Meals for All Public School Students also includes language which would provide grants for the purchase of local food products. Finally, we have our miscellaneous category for K-12 education. One of these is Illinois' HB 3643, which was introduced in 2023, but it was vetoed by the governor and the legislature was unable to override the veto. Had this legislation passed, it would have required each school board to provide religious dietary food options as a part of the school lunch program. So that's relevant in the sense that in the previous meeting, an area of discussion that received some attention was ensuring culturally preferred foods were accessible through these programs. And finally, we have Arizona's HB 2352, which also died in committee and did not pass, but had it passed, it would have established the No Lunch Debt Grant Program, which would have awarded school districts or charter schools grants to be credited to the meal account of each student who incurred a lunch meal debt.
So moving on to higher education, we're going to cover a couple topics today, and that's SNAP eligibility, assisting students in navigating and accessing support services and resources, and hunger-free campus programs. So first we'll cover SNAP eligibility. So some states have proposed legislation aimed at reducing barriers to establishing SNAP eligibility for students enrolled in institutions of higher education, at least half-time, through expanding in state legislation the type of educational or work-study programs that qualify for the work-study or work-training program exemption in SNAP. So a couple examples of this would be Illinois in 2017 passed a bill that established that any educational program offered at any Illinois community college should be considered a work-study or a work-training program for the purposes of SNAP eligibility exemptions. Oops. And New York passed a bill that provides that all students attending an institution of higher education at least half-time and who are enrolled in a career or technical education program also meet the exemption to be eligible for SNAP. So moving on to navigating and accessing benefits and services. So several states have introduced legislation aimed at requiring institutions of higher education to establish programs or designated staff as campus liaisons for the purpose of assisting students at high risk of food insecurity in navigating and accessing available benefits, services, and resources. So a couple examples of these types of programs would be Texas in 2023 required every institution of higher education to designate at least one staff member liaison officer to support students who are parents of a child younger than 18 years of age by making sure that they're aware of the support services and resources available to them through the higher education and assist them in navigating such services and resources. In 2023, Washington State passed a bill called Student Basic Needs at Public Post-Secondary Institutions Act, which requires each institution of higher education to have at least one benefits navigator to assist students in accessing public health benefits, existing emergency assistance programs, and other community resources. So this is really targeted at making sure students on campus have access to not only resources on the campus, but also other relevant community resources. So finally, we have establishing hunger-free campus grant programs. So several states have passed legislation establishing or expanding hunger-free campus grant programs. So this is similar to a bill in our own legislation, House Bill 827, as introduced in Senate Bill 318, which was continued in Senate Finance from both of these are from the 2024 session of our General Assembly. So these examples include Minnesota in 2021 expanded its existing hunger-free campus program from serving only community and technical students to including all public universities. Maryland, also in 2021, established the Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program to address student hunger and basic food needs on campus. And finally, Illinois in 2023 required the Board of Higher Education to establish the Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program for the purpose of providing grants to public institutions of higher education that meet the requirements for being designated a hunger-free campus. And finally, the bill is on this page, legislation that don't fit in any of the boxes we've discussed already. So that would be Delaware, just this in 2024, established the Delaware Grocery Initiative for the purpose of expanding access to healthy foods in food deserts and areas at high risk of becoming food deserts by providing grants and other forms of financial assistance to any eligible source that provides or enables access, availability, or affordability of healthy food products, including food retailers, food banks, food pantries, specialty grocers, supermarkets, corner stores, restaurants, state benefits offices, food box voucher programs, etc. So this is included because at the last meeting, I know there was a discussion of the corner store program initiative. And we have more information included in the materials on the 918 meeting page, a document that provides more information on the status of that corner store initiative. And then in New York in 2023, unfortunately, this bill died in committee. This bill would have allocated money remaining from the CARES Act and any future federal stimulus programs to a state program or initiative that provides funding to food banks, emergency food programs, or other participating entities. So that wraps up all of the legislation from across states. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Julia?
No, I think that that concludes the presentation, and I don't know if anybody has any questions or if Madam Chair would like to make any remarks on this.
Yeah, definitely want to see if anybody has any questions or comments from what we've heard so far.
This is Pamela, and I wrote in the chat, but based on their employment training program, one of the greatest obstacles to move people from food insecurity to food security, particularly those that are accessing public benefits, is the benefit cliff. And I do agree with the state's initiative. I don't recall what state, but to give a bump up in benefits to people that are transitional into more gainful employment for at least a year to 18 months to be able to provide the additional resources for childcare, housing, and for food assistance. I think it's absolutely necessary. I come from food stamp advocacy many, many years ago, worked many years in this industry, and I believe that that is one of the answers to allowing individuals to be food secure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Are there any other questions or comments based off agenda item 2? And I see we have been joined by Delegate Cousins and Senator Pekarsky. Thank you all for joining. Okay, awesome. So we'll turn it back over to Julia and Hannah for an overview. If you'll remember, in our August meeting, we had lots of input given on just different topics that we are seeing within our own industries as it pertains to hunger. And as they are going back over this overview, if you'll remember that we're going to start trying to work to prioritizing some of these issues into a work plan for what we're going to focus on for the 2025 session, and then what we can focus on for 2026. So Julia and Hannah, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So agenda item 3 is, as Madam Chair said, an overview of the topics discussed in the August meeting. The document is available in the meeting materials in that link that I sent. I'm going to see if I can screen share it as well to have it.
And Julia, that reminds me, it has been corrected on the website, so everything should be listed from today under the 25th now.
Wonderful. Okay. Can everybody see that? Or where did it go? Yep, okay. So I'm not going to go through and read every single item because there is a lot here. There was a lot discussed. This is mainly for a resource for the members in beginning to address the discussion in agenda item 5. It took all of the notes on pretty much every single topic that was addressed, discussed, or referenced during the commission's first meeting in August and tried to categorize them into some general major subject areas. So we have these overarching themes and objectives, which were sort of these key points that kept being touched back on, and using, in the first 3 cases, quotes that were actually from the meeting. You'll also see this resource, which was also referenced, the Virginia Roadmap to End Hunger. Those are also in the meeting materials, the PDFs for the original report, which was published in 2020, and the 2024 update. So that should be available to all of the members as well as the public on the meeting page. The next section or category is all of the topics related to community and local programs, partnerships, and aid. So there's a lot of discussion relating to trying to create programs, partnerships, or encourage cooperation and collaboration between local growers and farmers and state agencies and communities to address food insecurity and try to uplift and provide greater options for healthy and nutritious foods to individuals. And another resource worth noting, there was some discussion about agency issue reports being necessary or required still for the Healthy Corner Store initiative in particular. We tracked that down, and that issue report is also available as a PDF in the meeting materials for anybody who is interested. And the next category is education. We have K through 12 education, and it breaks down all of these topic areas that were touched on, including specific objectives relating to them, benefits of achieving the objectives that were discussed, specific concerns that still need to be addressed, and considerations that could be addressed as part of these objectives or categories. There's also some links to legislation that was passed in Virginia's General Assembly in prior sessions that was successful in addressing some of these areas that could be built off of or just as examples. So links were included, as well as summarized summaries of those for anyone interested. The next is higher education as a subcategory of education. The next category was improving accessibility and meeting needs of underserved populations, which is where we have the concerns that were discussed about hot and prepared food should not be a luxury, and how this creates accessibility issues for particularly individuals with disabilities and seniors or aging individuals in terms of physical access, not only in getting the food, but also in preparing and food preparation limitations and meeting nutritional needs, as well as exacerbating difficulties already faced by people living in food deserts or areas with limited access to fresh food. There was discussion about trying to improve senior participation rates in SNAP and other existing assistance programs and opportunities, as well as concerns about inadequate infrastructure to even assist seniors in availing themselves of existing assistance. And finally, there was a discussion of culturally preferred foods and the fact that a lot of these programs and assistance programs treat the Northern European diet as the default, And so considerations considerations for expanding access to culturally preferred foods was a point of discussion. And the final category is basically just wrapping it all up and putting this document in context of agenda item 5, which would be discussion of consideration of legislative priorities and focus areas for the 2025 session.
So we obviously have covered quite a bit of ground in just one meeting that we had prior to this one. So wanting to see at this time if there are any questions, concerns, or comments. And I do see Delegate Benita Anthony's hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We covered an extensive piece on trying to end hunger in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but I did wanted to ask a question, and if any members or staff can correct me on this, but I believe that we have not had a food desert mapping initiative since 2017, and wanted to ask if we could possibly reinstate that to have an updated food mapping initiative for food deserts, and overlaying, food apartheid layers or, racial demographics, as well as transportation access, and drilling down using GIS, an entire initiative to regenerate that, and then have the commission to, maybe even create a task force to, be able to update those maps, every 3 years or so, so that we could be, continue, providing initiatives for the Commonwealth through legislation.
Yeah, thank you for that, and reminding us that in order for us to do our jobs and make good legislation, we need the best data possible. So we can absolutely add that to the list that we'll be considering for our priorities. Senator Rome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Madam Chair, I wanted to mention when I was listening to the presentation, especially regarding the bills that came out in New Jersey, one of the things that I've focused on in terms of, passing 14 different, school meals bills and, 2 more for adults and stuff is what are some of the overlooked accessibility things that we have that are very easy to implement, they're no cost, and it's just because we haven't thought of them before. The applying for and enrolling through to SNAP by phone, that seems to be one of those very basic things that we should be able to do and accomplish that should cost either nothing or next to nothing, in the same way that, I think about if I get toll by mail, right? If I go visit my mom who lives in Chincoteague and I have to, I go over the bridge in Maryland and they send me a happy little bill in the mail, I have an option there of whether I want to pay by phone or online. I actually like doing it by phone. It actually works for me. That's the sort of thing where it's just like, all right, an automated system should be relatively simple. And so accumulating, what I guess my ask for staff on this is if we could find out budgetary impacts of any of these, or in our lingo, fiscal impact statements that would have been attached to any of these, and then find ones that come in at no cost and virtual no cost. Those, if and when the time comes for the commission to make recommendations for legislation, I think that's the sort of stuff where we might be able to get unanimous support, across chambers and party lines.
Yes, thank you. And also be able to chunk it out from the zero cost to the little bit of cost to a lot of cost, knowing that the economic updates for the money committee seems that Virginia's economy is doing really well, and that we might have some surplus funding that we can put toward, especially our most vulnerable residents. I don't see any other hands at this moment. So we will move forward to the next agenda item, knowing that there's another point of discussion that we will have for commission members. But first, I want to bring up Randy Kesey with the Peninsula. Oh, I'm sorry.
I apologize.
Yes, Delegate Taylor.
I'm terrible trying to find the raise your hand. And I apologize if I missed this. I represent Petersburg, and we've been having a lot of issues with school lunches, and I was excited to see some ideas for state legislation regarding school lunches, but I have not served on education, so I my only concern with that, and I'd like to hear your feedback. How do we work around federally funded lunches so that that funding is not interrupted?
Yeah, I saw Delegate Rome's hand if you want to chime in, and then I have a thought too.
Oh, Senator Rome, but that's okay, Madam Chair. So first off, it's actually a really good question that comes up a lot, which is basically, okay, if we want to increase nutritional value within schools in particular, and we have this limited amount of money, especially if we all watched the Last Week Tonight kind of takedown on this, it was actually it was done really well. Like, just like, even if I'm putting my reporter hat on, it was factually accurate about how things were being broken down. And the idea that you're having $1.25 essentially to play with in terms of, food quality. One part of this that we go into is, why did we pass the Farm to School Task Force bill this year? And part of that is the idea that you can get high quality food that's grown locally, which cuts down on transportation costs, cuts down on a lot of middleman costs essentially, and is healthier product, being able to get that into the school system. The next part that we did in the budget this year is, for the first time in 12 years, we actually increased the state allotment that comes for the reimbursement rate for the school breakfast program. We did that by, I think, 6 cents. There are ways that the state government, in this case, can basically complement or supplement what the federal government is already giving us. And so we have the ability as legislators to put more money into the quality portion of the program here. At the same time, here's going to be the next part. What happens with the locality? Is the locality itself in a position to put forward money, or in a position to basically contribute to this beyond simply having the workforce that's producing it? So this is one of those things where it really has to take all 3 levels of government working well together. And the immediacy that I have here is, number one, let's continue increasing that reimbursement rate for lunches at this case in terms of the state's share of that. Number 2 on this, let's make sure that we are expediting delivery of locally grown product the same way that we heard earlier from other states that have passed similar legislation regarding this that we heard at the top of the presentation. And then the third part, and this is where you could have a challenge for Petersburg, just like where I live here in Manassas Park, where Petersburg and Manassas Park for actually a good while were both really tied in a economic distress virtual level. Manassas Park was almost there. Well, Petersburg was there. Where sometimes a locality that is financially strapped will simply take the minimum requirement because they cannot afford to go beyond that. And so that goes into one of the bills that we actually passed this past year in terms of how are we looking at the state, not just like reimbursement rate, but the revenue share rate that we actually have with our localities in the first place, and the funding formula for that. I think all of that comes together. And so the short answer, the short version of this very long-winded presentation for me is that there are a lot of different things that we can do here. And chances are we're not going to have one omnibus that's going to do all the things, but we do certainly have a lot of different items to pick from.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
very
And the only
helpful.
thing,
Thank you.
yep, the only thing that I would add is we have 578 signatures on my day job. There's a petition that some sophomores in high school are running, and they're actually fighting for better quality meals, in the sense of, we've gotten to a point where we are now providing food, but we are providing food that either doesn't look, smell, or taste like anything they want, and so it's being wasted. And so I think it's really incumbent upon us listening and weighing out all the options, but you're not going to get to tasty and nutritious with the money from the feds. And I would second the motion for you all to check out that John Oliver special on school meals. It did break down quite a bit, but all around the Commonwealth, we have student input that says we're hungry, we need food in order to be our best selves, and the food that we're getting right now is not it. So wanting to put their input in that as well. But thank you, Delegate Taylor. And as we are moving to our presentations, if anyone else has anything to raise, we do have one more discussion part on our agenda. but really excited to welcome Randy Kesey from the Peninsula Agency on Aging to talk about some of the issues that seniors are facing and also some potential solutions. Thank you for being here, Randy.
Thank you, Delegate Price. I appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me here on behalf of Peninsula Agency on Aging. I'm honored really to have this opportunity to speak to everybody, especially to talk about something that's often invisible, which is hunger for older adults. But before I begin, I just want to quickly explain and tell you who and what the area agencies are in the community and their role in the state of Virginia, in case you're unfamiliar with them. Virginia is home to 25 AAAs serving every locality in the state. And the mission is simple, but it's very critical. It's to help older adults remain in their homes for as long as possible as they continue to age, because we know that it is the most cost-effective way to our resources. And the cost of AAA services are really supported by a combination of federal, state, local, private dollars, ensuring that older adults are receiving the services that they need to stay in their home to age with dignity and the support. And by providing essential services, whether it's transportation, whether it's a meal delivery or an in-home care service, AAAs really are the front line of defense for older adults who wish to stay in their homes or in homes of family members. So now, when we think about hunger, oftentimes, and just from the discussion I'm hearing today, we picture children or families who are struggling to make ends meet. But hunger really doesn't discriminate by age. And today, more than 10% of older adults in Virginia really face food insecurity. That's nearly 160,000 people. And that's your grandparents, that's your neighbors, that's friends who don't know really where their next meal is going to come from. And with our aging population continuing to grow, we all know that this is just going to be on a rise as well. So who really are the older adults behind these numbers? So Virginia is home to nearly 1.6 million residents age 60 and older. They come from diverse backgrounds, including low-income individuals, non-native English speakers, and members of the LGBTQ community. So many are living on fixed income. They're struggling to keep up with rising cost of living, housing, and healthcare costs. Some have limited mobility or lack access to reliable transportation, making it even more difficult to get to grocery stores or to food pantries that are available to them. Others live alone, isolated from support networks that might otherwise help them access nutritious foods. Now imagine having to choose between buying groceries and paying for medication. Imagine being unable to prepare a meal because your arthritis makes it so painful to hold a knife. These are really the difficult choices and barriers that many older adults face in Virginia every single day. And the impact of food insecurity on their lives is really profound. Hunger and poor nutrition, as you've mentioned, can lead to serious health issues like malnutrition and increased to illnesses, we'll say. It can exacerbate chronic conditions like diabetes and hypertension, but we all know that that impact isn't just physical, it's also emotional too. Older adults who face food insecurity are more likely to suffer from depression and anxiety. They feel a loss of dignity and a loss of independence and diminished quality of life. Now, despite the magnitude of this issue, it's often overlooked. We have great programs like Meals on Wheels, SNAP benefits, and local food banks doing incredible work to support older adults. But even these vital programs face challenges, such as us. We have long wait lists, insufficient funding, and limited reach. Too many older adults still fall through these cracks, unaware of the resources available to them and unable to access them due to logistical barriers. But again, it's not all bleak. There are success stories right here in our community that show what's possible when we come together to support older adults. With PAA, Peninsula Agency on Aging, we partner with our local businesses, and we have support of amazing dedicated volunteers that they're able to help provide these nutritious meals to older adults who really go without. And programs like the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program has been incredible, giving low-income older adults access to those fresh produce, promoting that healthy eating that you're all discussing. So what can we do to build on these successes and to ensure that no older adult in Virginia really has to go hungry? Well, first, we have to advocate for increased funding and support for older nutrition programs at both a state and a federal level. But at a state level, our older adults deserve more than just that bare minimum. They deserve that consistent access to healthy, nutritious food that supports their health. With the AAAs here in Virginia, we serve 1.4 million older adults out of that 1.6 million. And so funding for these services, like I mentioned, really come from a combination of the federal, state, local, and private dollars. But given the rising need of older adults across the state, the Virginia Association of Area Agencies on Aging is seeking a $4.35 million investment from the Commonwealth to address this growing unmet need and demand for services to ensure that older adults have the support that they need to thrive in the communities. Secondly, simple enough, we can enhance accessibility. You all were discussing this. This means expanding transportation services to older adults to help them get to grocery stores, to get them to the food pantries. It means developing mobile grocery stores, pop-up meal sites to bring food directly to those who need it the most. Third, raising awareness. We need to educate our communities about the issues of older adult hunger and reduce that stigma associated with seeking help. Because no one, as we all know, should not feel ashamed to ask for assistance. Really, it's a sign of strength, I feel. It's not weakness. And finally, I think we need to improve upon program outreach, just as you mentioned with Texas and New Jersey addressing it, leveraging technology to simplify the application process for SNAP benefits and to ensure that our services are really culturally sensitive and inclusive to make sure that we're meeting that diverse need of our older adult population. As we know, hunger should never be a part of anyone's story, especially not for those who have spent their whole lives contributing to the communities. It's time for us to all come together and ensure that every older adult in Virginia has access to food and support where they live with dignity and with independence. So with that, I will thank you for everyone on this call for your compassion and your commitment to this, because I feel like we all together can make this great difference for older adults and access to hunger and nutrition. So thank you.
Randy, thank you all so much for the work that you do on behalf of our older residents. And I can attest to what a volunteer can do for the programs that are available. And just, thank you for being there for them.
Yeah,
and we are going to now hear from the director of No Kid Hungry Virginia, Sarah Steele.
Madam Chair and members of the commission, thank you for having me today. I'm Sarah. I'm the director of No Kid Hungry Virginia, which is a campaign of the national nonprofit Share Our Strength. And I'm here today to share a brief overview with you of some recent polling that we did in August 2024 to understand Virginians' experiences with hunger and food insecurity. So I know you have a ton of data that you're using to make your considerations. This is really timely content just pulled a few weeks ago from residents right here in your districts. We worked with a firm called Change Research to survey over 1,200 Virginians, and we made sure that that sample was representative of the adult population in Virginia in terms of age, race, geography, presidential voting choice, etc. So at a top line, we found that over 3/4 of Virginians say that it is harder today to afford groceries than it was a year ago. And because I do work for a nonprofit focused on youth and families, it jumped out at me that that number is even higher for families that have public school students. So for families with K through 12 kids, that was an 87% said it's harder to afford groceries than it was just a year ago. This shows up in a variety of ways in Virginians' lives, one of which is the choices that they make at the grocery store. We saw in the data that over half of respondents said that they're buying less or no fresh produce or protein in order to stretch their budgets and make ends meet. You can see here some of the other trade-offs that families are making in terms of healthy choices for themselves and their families, shopping at multiple locations, having something in their cart and putting it back, buying food at a discount because it's expiring soon. We know this isn't just about physical health. It isn't just about the nutrients that families are choosing between when they're making choices about their budgets. This is also a mental health challenge, with 58% of all Virginians and 68% of public school families saying they're more stressed about affording food than they were a year ago. And I know how I feel when I've had stress, right? Anxiety, trouble sleeping. You think about the impacts that this has on their mental health and then also on Virginians' physical health. Virginians are making tough trade-offs when it comes to buying food or meeting basic needs. So in the last 12 months, about half, 46 of all respondents said they've had to make a choice, a tough choice between purchasing the nourishing food for themselves and their families or buying gas or paying a utility bill, keeping the lights on, paying a medical bill or doing a car or home repair. These are difficult choices that no family should have to make. I think we can all agree on that, but we are seeing families having more trouble this time this year than they were a year ago. And we know this isn't just about today, unfortunately, it's also about tomorrow, with Virginians saying, over half of them, that they're very worried, and a higher percentage saying they have some amount of worry about their ability to buy groceries, to nourish themselves and their families if they experienced an unexpected $1,500 expense. And you could think of that as an unexpected car repair or, potentially a broken arm or something like that. So many Virginians are one emergency away from experiencing hunger. And then this is close to home. As Randy just said, we all know someone. It's our neighbors, our coworkers, people we go to church with, people we see at the grocery store, with the majority of Virginians, nearly 7 in 10, saying they're either experiencing food insecurity or know someone who is. This is in every single corner of the Commonwealth, every county and city, and we're seeing it very, very close to home for our neighbors. Shifting just briefly to the solutions lens, we asked some questions about how Virginians felt about action, policy action on addressing childhood hunger, and Virginians are nearly unanimous in believing that this should be a shared bipartisan goal. I think this commission is a great reflection of that, and that there's plenty of levers, plenty of options, threads to pull on to address this need that we see in our houses and our communities. And then thinking about some of the interventions that we see, just calling your attention to that over half of public school families say, yes, this is helping me. This is helping me stretch my budget, with over half of families saying they use at least one program like a food pantry, SNAP, or free school meals to help them make ends meet. And I think that this slide, to me, as I know so much of your discussion has already addressed, is that the utilization of these programs doesn't quite match the need that we see in the other questions, right? So there's more we can do. There's more, we're not done yet, right? We have more to do to make sure that these well-intentioned but often underutilized programs are actually benefiting Virginians. And then I'll close. I'm just going to leave this slide up while I conclude with you. In the poll, we asked about 25 questions, some of which I just shared with you today. We also left space for longer form responses, and Virginians were so generous with their time and shared really thoughtful content with us. This is in response to the question about imagine a world where you had an unlimited grocery budget. How would that affect you? With respondents saying they want to eat healthier. They don't want to skip meals. They don't want to feel stressed about food. They have a whole list of things that they'd rather be allocating their grocery budget towards if they were struggling. And we saw a lot of respondents writing and saying, I'm going into credit card debt just to put food on the table. And I have long form responses for this question, for several other questions. And as you can see, it's broken that we can identify the locality. So to members of the commission, if you're interested in digging into this data in your district, I'd be more than happy to follow up with you after this and share some of that information about your neighbors in your community. So that was a very brief overview. I tried as hard as I could not to narrate or editorialize. You have a one-pager in your resources with more information, and I'd be happy to dig deeper with anyone who wants more information. But Madam Chair, members of the commission, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for the work that you're doing to have information from the constituents that we all serve from August is quite timely. Are there any questions or comments for either Sarah or Randy? Senator Rome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, just knowing how a legislator's brain works, if to Sarah, if you'd just like to just go ahead and send each legislator the breakdown by our districts, we would be very grateful and appreciative, and we will read them.
Yeah, I was gonna send that message as well. So I think that's a proactive thing you can do to not get 140 messages requesting it. And if you need help, we can absolutely facilitate that. Are there any other questions or comments from the information that we've heard? Okay, seeing none. And then, of course, we have contact information should you all have any. But usually when you all have a question, the answers benefit all of the commissioners. So definitely let us know. So Sarah and Randy, you are off the hook and can stay or head out. But thank you all so much for your time and for being valuable resources, not only in your services, but also in the information that we need for the work that we're doing. I do apologize. I'm in a more public space than I anticipated in being at this moment. But we're going to now move to the discussion portion where I reached out to you and asked to think ahead of time. Give me 1 second. Okay, so thank you. So for the discussion part, as we've heard a lot of information during our August meeting and now with our September meeting, and I know each of the commissioners brings additional information to the table as well. One, I want to offer the opportunity that if you have a slide deck or a presentation from an organization on which you are participating on behalf and would like for us to share it with all of the commissioners, that is absolutely an okay thing to do. But we also have got to move from lots of information toward whittling it down to our priorities for what we're going to do for the legislative recommendations for 2025, and then we can continue those conversations. So it is our hope today that we can have further discussion from any of your ideas for legislative solutions and focus areas and kind of get that into a work plan for us for what we'll do for the rest of this year and then what we'll continue to do next year. So at this time, I will entertain anyone that wants to chime in on other legislative priorities or solutions that they see would be important.
Madam Chair.
Senator, let me go with Senator Rome, and then I'll hit you back, Delegate Anthony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're expecting the recommendations to have come out from our work group regarding universal free school meals. My understanding is what we are to expect is going to be basically a recommendation for a pilot program with this. I'm going to take this thing as far as it can go, and I'm happy to have the support of anyone who would like to jump on with that legislation. And again, as I said in the first meeting, I'd like to thank Senator Newcraig for being one of the first people to jump on that back when we were in committee together. So thank you. Next part on this is bringing back the campus, the Hunger Free Campus Act. But beyond that, once we get back the fiscal statements for the earlier recommendations and ideas coming from other states, I'm happy to reserve a bill or two regarding SNAP accessibility, for example, among other areas. But I think it might be that if we've got a number of different items that are low cost or no cost, it might just be best for all of us, considering that we have bill limits, to see if we can divide it up among the group and see if everyone's got a subject matter interest or something, to just kind of pick one and run with it.
Thank you for that reminder. And for those that aren't aware, what Senator Rome is saying is that there's a specific number of bills that I know it's 15 for us. Is it 20? Okay, 20 for the senators. So that means that That's the maximum number of bills that we're able to propose officially during the 2025 session. The 2025 session is also a short session, but some of the proposals might also be budgetary items. And so there are no limits on that, at least for the House. And then there are also resolutions. If there's anything that is considered to be a joint resolution, there are no limits on that for the House. So that's something to consider. But yes, I think if each of us can reserve a spot or two at least for those ideas that are coming out, that would be great. Delegate Anthony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I understand that we are making sure that in this short session that we put forth legislation that has very little fiscal impact. So I did start researching the piece on the updated food mapping, and I will present that to you, Madam Chair. I know that's going to be a tremendous fiscal impact as well. But I did wanted to insert possibly as we're looking at farm to school initiatives, it seems like everything is some of the things that I was looking at prior to and trying to make sure I build my resources up from what has been done through the legislature already, is that we could consider community gardens or establish community gardens within that farm to school initiative. And I will submit an idea that I have that, just something for us to think about and to review.
Thank you. And that reminds me, should there be any suggestions that need to be submitted in writing, we can make that available at our next meeting, and also to make sure that the public knows that we are welcoming a public comment and input, specifically if there are any stats or data points or legislative solutions that would be important. Let's go to Eddie, Mr. Oliver. And if you're not speaking, if you could mute, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to take an opportunity to drill down on the senior hunger issue for a moment. There's a report by the National Council on Aging that came out earlier this month that showed that more than 100,000 seniors who are eligible for SNAP in Virginia aren't participating. It's about 38% who are eligible. So I think maybe there's a comprehensive package we can look at specifically for how to improve participation in SNAP among seniors. There's a variety of things that we saw from other states I think we could implement that don't necessarily have a fiscal impact, including extending the certification period. We did institute a simplified application process for seniors already. I don't know what we're doing around maximizing data matching between agencies, but the notion of automatically enrolling Medicare, Medicaid, and SNAP is very interesting to me. Also, as advocates, those of us who are doing outreach at food banks, we are very focused on getting approval for something called telephonic signature, which would allow those of us who do outreach and do application assistance to submit applications online on behalf of our clients. Currently, we don't have the authority to do that, but we could. We just need to pursue it. And so I think there could potentially be a legislative vehicle to implement that. The Department of Social Services does have a call center where individuals can call and submit applications over the phone, but there are obviously capacity limits there, awareness issues, and so I think expanding that to community outreach agencies is critical. And then the last thing that would have a fiscal impact, but is a huge driver in this low participation rate among seniors, is just that the minimum benefit is too low. Other states have increased the minimum benefit to, I think, $70, $90 a month. We've suggested bringing it up to $50 a month. Previous estimates put that ballpark between $12 and $14 million a year. But that's the single thing that would have the biggest impact on SNAP participation among seniors.
I appreciate that. And I don't want the legislators to be misheard. We definitely are going to have some proposals that are going to have a cost to it. And as we're going into, I guess, the back half of the biennium for budgets, we are able to still put in budget requests, and it's based off, forecasting and all of those sorts of things. But I know that other issue areas are going to definitely be putting budget requests in. So why not, for us to be able to think about that on behalf of our most vulnerable residents. So the sky's the limit, honestly, and then we can prioritize from there. But please, please, please put out all of those great ideas. And I saw, if somebody can mute on the phone. But I saw lots of heads shaking yes when you were speaking on some of those. So I will see if there's anyone else that has any legislative solutions or priorities that they want to mention that may not have been mentioned yet. Senator Craig?
I'm sorry. You guys hear me? I'm on the phone.
Yes, I'm sorry. Did you have something that you wanted to add to the conversation?
Yes, ma'am. And I apologize. I'm trying to figure out how to raise my hand on the phone, and it's just not working.
Sure. Glad you jumped in. Yes.
While we're waiting on the farm bill that has huge impact, a lot with food assistance. The LSPA program that came out from the USDA that was disseminated through states has been very, very helpful to help with food insecurity. And it also helps farmers, and it also helps the local economy. And it doesn't have any age boundaries, and it doesn't have any ethnicity boundaries or anything like that. And they've also, JMU has also done a video series on it. There's data there, there's poundage, there's value, there's measurable things that we could utilize to make a case for having a state program, since it doesn't appear that the LFBA is going to get into the farm bill, that perhaps Virginia could be the leaders in this. And not only are we helping to fight food insecurity, but we're also helping farmers and we're helping the local economy, but we're also minimizing food waste, because food waste is about 14% of the environmental problems that we have with greenhouse gases. But if Virginia had an LSPA program itself set up, it wouldn't take a lot of administrative costs because it's already been implemented by the federal agencies. And Virginia has already run their state program that way. But I would just think it would be a consideration where we could be leaders and, okay, the federal people aren't going to put this into the Farm Bill, but Virginia's going to put it someplace. And there's data, videos, and all kinds of things that we can get to you for free that's already been done to support that.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I think you're right. Whatever the feds won't be able to get done, we should definitely be looking at on our end. Senator Craig, did you have something? Yeah, go for it.
Yes, thank you. And this may not be, maybe Julia can help us. So I've had a couple constituents that they were on the food stamp program, and they have several kids. And they work, they're 15 and 16 years old, and they work, say, at zeros. And so they earn maybe $200 or $300, maybe $500 a month. Because they live in the house, the parents lost their food stamps. These kids don't contribute. So what do you tell these kids? You're going to work now and support the family. I think we need to look at that, because that's what's very disheartening to me. These kids are working probably to save up. If they're in a low-income family like my daughter and her husband, and this happened to them, they're already struggling. They're struggling to make ends meet. They have a couple kids, and they're teaching their kids to work young and save money. And, I can't buy a car, but you're going to work to help, buy you a car when you turn 18 years old or whatever. And their food stamps got taken away because they had 3 kids under the age of 18, 15, 16, 17 working. I don't know if that's something we can look at, but I was just shocked that would happen. These kids shouldn't be giving their parents their money when they're trying to work, underage. If they were over 18, that's fine. They're an adult. But anybody under 18, we really need to look at that. I don't know if that would fall under our purview as, the Commission to End Hunger, or if y'all can, Juliet, send me to somebody that, we could talk to figure out how to help people. Because I'm sure if it's happening to one, it's happening to a lot.
Yeah, I thank you for raising that because we had a constituent where the grandma brought in a underage kid while the mom was getting some things in her life settled, and similar things happened that impacted the finances. So we don't want to disincentivize people taking care of each other in that sense. So thank you. And I did want to also mention too, there are bills that were sponsored last year, but were not ultimately considered because we either didn't have enough time to discuss it in full, there were too many questions around it. So if something has been proposed before, but might need a second conversation, it would actually help that bill if it became a recommendation out of this commission as it tried to navigate back through the General Assembly, whether in a short session in 2025 or a longer session in 2026. So it's not a one-shot deal in making legislation. I think some of us can attest to we've had bills that it took 4 or 5 tries for us to get legislation through. So that is still definitely part of the conversation. Was there anything else that anybody wanted to enter into our conversation today?
I'll just
Delegate Cousins.
Hi, thank you. So Hunger Free Campus, definitely. I'm looking forward to seeing the results from the SHAV survey. I know we won't get those until November 1st, but to the extent that there are any legislative solutions that we can introduce there, obviously I would like to do that in January. And then I've been following or looking more into this Virginia Fresh Match incentive program that provides STAP recipients with like a 1-to-1 match for produce for fruits and vegetables. And it looks like in our funding for in 2021, so over in that budget for over the 2 years, we funded that with $2 million, which just seems a little bit low considering the success that the program has had. So I would love to see like some increase in funding there, perhaps. Just something to think about. And then another sort of theme that, and I don't know, if we need to establish some sort of like formal task force or how we would go about just bringing stakeholders together, including state agencies. But I just wonder if there is, when I think about like the maternal health task force, like the farm to school task force that we created, if there's like a space for a task force that would involve the Department of Agriculture, perhaps the Virginia Department of Health, and any other, maybe like DMAS, any other agencies, and so a combination of agency representatives and community partners who can sort of all come together to develop like a comprehensive plan on addressing food access. I was speaking to, it was a representative from the Virginia Fresh Match Incentive Program this morning who mentioned that the Department of Agriculture doesn't have one person who's dedicated to food insecurity and food access. So that might be a budgetary thing that we can do as well, just to provide increased funding to the Department of Agriculture for that position, perhaps. So those are just some of the things that I've been thinking about. So.
No, I appreciate that. And I don't know that there are any limits on who else we can invite to the table. So we can definitely invite agencies, especially with meeting with our wonderful staff attorneys and having conversations in upcoming meetings with that. If there's anything in particular that you would want to hear or get in presentation form, definitely let me know and we can send out those invitations for our October meeting as we're moving toward final votes on our recommendations for the 2025. Thank you, Senator Pekarsky.
Hey everyone, thank you for the presentations. I have just a couple of comments. So I represent Northern Virginia, which I know many don't consider to have, food insecurity. At least that's not what comes to mind, right? However, we have large pockets of food insecure folks up here. And there was recently capital area food bank report that said that number has grown significantly. And what was really shocking about it is that they are seeing it grow in middle-class families. That's a real problem. So, you know, I think we need to think about that as we're looking at what our priorities are going to be. I think the data is so important. I really love the food mapping idea. Just, you know, the food insecurity mapping, just so we know where are the greatest areas of need. And I look at all these programs and I want to do them all. And I think they're all amazing. And I know the needs are all there. But I think it's going to be really hard to kind of prioritize these, you know, if we don't know how much things cost. I basically want to have the most bang for our buck at the end of the day, so that we're going to suggest and recommend, put our stamp of approval on bills that are going to go as far as they possibly can. So that's the kind of information, you know, I'm new on the committee, so that's the kind of information I'm hoping that we can work towards as we're thinking about how to move forward with these. And anyway, that's it. Thank you. And
yeah, thank you.
Oh,
that's a great flag for us to be able to make those decisions. So thank you for raising that, and we'll be sure to have more information, especially on costs that are coming from proposals that were in other states that we might just want to translate to Virginia. It's really frustrating when you have a wonderful idea and a great bill, and then you find out like a day before the vote that the fiscal impact statement says it costs $1 bazillion. So any of that research that we can do on the front end, or knowing that something, we don't have all the data, it might become a year two priority for us. But thank you for that flag. Anyone else have something that they want to add as we're hearing about all of the layers that go into the problem of hunger, but also the solutions that we might be able to have? Okay, seeing none at this time, please still reserve the right to chime in later if something hits you, or if you have new information. If you've quoted any statistics today, or there's any new information that supports the legislative proposals that you've mentioned, if you could please send that to Julia and Hannah so that they can have resources as well as we continue these conversations. You'll be receiving a few emails to make sure that you have access to everything that we are looking at. And then in our October meeting, we will move a little bit closer to hearing more about solutions, but also starting to prioritize the areas that we want to move forward with in 2025. And then based on another date that we have, I want to remind us that we have a November 30th date that is our deadline for legislators to get in our drafting requests for any of the bills that we seek to carry next year. So we'll have that November meeting to finalize our recommendations prior to that deadline, but it might need to be after we receive some of the reports that are due back. So we'll make sure that we get some options to you for the November date, but we look to see you in person at our October meeting, so that if there are votes that we need to take on some of these priorities, we can do that. Are there any closing remarks or any announcements that anyone has? Seeing none, just want to ask Julia, Hannah, is there anything that I may have missed that you need to add?
No, Madam Chair, I think that you touched on everything, and we have written down all of these various proposals and ideas, as well as requests for further research, accumulating data, particularly on the fiscal impacts of legislation in other states and how that might translate to the Commonwealth. And we will be prepared to discuss with Madam Chair, preparing presentations or speaking on this in the October and subsequent meetings.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for your time today. We look forward to seeing you again. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.